So picture this. What if your actual ticket to a high-powered government job, like a really prestigious post, wasn't about connections or battlefield glory, but about how well you could write a poem, a flawless one?
Right. Imagine your ability to craft perfect verse, perfect meter was the key measure of your fitness to govern.
And think about this too. How does a guy who spent his life wandering around China trying to get rulers to listen to his ideas, and mostly failing, by his own admission, how does he become maybe the most influential single philosopher in all of human history, shaping civilizations for millennia?
It's an incredible story, isn't it?
We usually think of ancient literature dealing with big questions like mortality in Gilgamesh or fate for the Greeks. But what if literature's main job in some cultures was actually much more, well, practical, like creating a perfectly harmonious society right here on Earth?
Building order through words.
And who wrote the world's first novel? We're talking 600 years before Don Quixote. And what was her secret? Welcome to a new episode from our series, The Story of Literature from English Plus Podcast.
Today, we're heading east. We're taking a deep dive into the ancient literary worlds of China. And then we'll see how that cultural DNA spread and transformed in places like Japan and Korea.
Okay.
And our mission really is to explore a world where the pen, or maybe more accurately the brush, was often genuinely mightier than the sword, where literature wasn't just art for art's sake.
It had stakes.
Huge stakes. It was about power, it was about governance, it was about keeping society stable and ordered. It's quite a different perspective.
Yeah, you mentioned other traditions like the Sumerians wrestling with death, the Greeks with fate, the Indians mapping spiritual journeys.
Exactly. Those often look upwards or inwards in a metaphysical way. Here in East Asia, the focus shifts. It becomes incredibly practical. Mastering the classics, honing your writing, that was literally how you qualified to help run an empire.
So good writing wasn't just, a nice skill to have, it was the key.
It was the absolute key. It created this unique class of people, scholar officials, philosopher administrators, who governed using their knowledge, their ethics, and their aesthetic refinement.
Okay, let's unpack that because it's a huge idea. How did writing get so central to power? Where do we start?
We have to start in China, around the 6th century BCE. It's a period called the Spring and Autumn period. And honestly, you need to understand just how chaotic and violent this time was.
Right, this wasn't a peaceful philosophical retreat.
Not at all. The old Zhou dynasty, which had provided some stability, had basically crumbled. Central power just evaporated.
So what was left?
Hundreds of small states, basically, all constantly fighting each other. It was centuries of relentless warfare, shifting alliances, broken treaties, just unending violence. And the ordinary people, they suffered immensely. It was a time of profound social breakdown.
A real crisis.
A deep crisis.
Yeah.
And into this steps Confucius. We know him as Confucius.
Master Kong.
Master Kong. And the crucial thing to grasp is, he wasn't some isolated scholar in a library. He saw himself as a political advisor, a potential reformer. He was obsessed with finding a way to fix this broken society.
So he had a plan.
He had a blueprint. And he spent years, maybe decades, literally wandering from one state court to another, pitching his ideas to rulers, trying to convince them, here's how you restore order.
How'd that go for him?
Well, that's the great irony. In his own lifetime, he mostly failed, miserably by his own standards. No major ruler fully implemented his system. He apparently died thinking he hadn't really achieved his life's goal.
Wow. So this failure
Becomes arguably the single most influential philosopher in history. His ideas became the bedrock of Chinese governance, society, and culture for over 2,000 years, and spread powerfully beyond China, too.
Okay, so what was his big idea? If it wasn't conquering armies, what was his solution to the chaos?
It was actually, counter-revolutionary in a way. He wasn't saying, let's invent something totally new.
Yeah.
No, he was a restorationist. He looked back to what he saw as a golden age, the early days of the Zhou dynasty, before the collapse, a time he idealized as peaceful, orderly, and properly governed.
So go back to the good old days.
Essentially, yes. His argument was, the problem isn't that we need new ideas, it's that we've forgotten the old, correct principles. His whole philosophy is basically a detailed manual for restoring that idealized past order. It's a blueprint for societal healing.
And how do we know his ideas? Did he write a big book?
Not exactly. What we have is the Analects. And it's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's not a grand philosophical system laid out like, say, Plato.
No. What is it then?
It's a collection. Sayings, little dialogues between him and his students, anecdotes about his life and teachings. It was all compiled by his disciples after he died.
So it's more like snapshots, glimpses.
Exactly. It gives you this incredibly personal feel. You feel like you're hearing his voice wise, principled, sometimes witty, sometimes quite stern, occasionally frustrated with students who aren't getting it or with the rulers he's trying to advise.
And the core message running through all these snapshots.
It's always the same fundamental point.
Yeah.
If you want to fix the state, you have to start by fixing the individual. You need to cultivate better human beings.
Right. Forget divine intervention or grand theories. Start with people.
Precisely. He wasn't that interested in gods or the afterlife. He insisted that a good society flows directly from individuals mastering the art of being good humans. And crucially, that goodness is all about how you relate to other people.
Okay, let's get into the key concepts then. The foundation.
The absolute foundation is Ren. It gets translated in many ways humaneness, benevolence, goodness.
Ren.
But the Chinese character itself gives you a clue. It's made of two parts, the symbol for a person and the symbol for the number 2.
Person plus 2. Meaning?
Meaning Ren isn't something you achieve in isolation. It only exists between people. It's about empathy, reciprocity, understanding how your actions affect others. It's that fundamental quality of seeing yourself in relation to everyone else.
Okay, so Ren is this internal quality, this empathy we need to develop. But how do you actually do that? How do you practice it?
Well, that brings us to the second key idea, lie.
Lie, ritual, propriety.
Exactly. Ritual, propriety, ceremony, etiquette. Now, for us today, ritual can sound kind of stiff, maybe empty.
Yeah, like just going through the motions.
Right. But for Confucius, lie was essential. It was the practical grammar of a civilized society. It prescribed everything: how you greet your parents, how you behave at a state banquet, the proper way to conduct funeral rites, even how you dress.
So rules for everything. Sounds a bit restrictive.
It might sound that way, but think of it like this. Lie is like moral calisthenics. It's the structured external practice that cultivates the internal quality of Ren.
How does that work?
The logic is, by consistently performing these respectful, ordered, appropriate actions, bowing correctly, speaking politely, observing the proper ceremonies, you habituate yourself to goodness. The external actions gradually shape your internal disposition. They train your empathy.
So the outer form molds the inner substance.
Precisely. The structure isn't empty. It's the engine for becoming a better person, for developing Ren.
And the goal of all this practice, cultivating Ren through lie, what do you become?
You strive to become a Junzi. This is often translated as the superior person or the gentleman.
The Junzi.
And this idea of the Junzi was probably his most radical challenge to the norms of his time.
How so?
Because in that aristocratic, chaotic spring and autumn period, you were a gentleman if you were born one. Status came from your family, your bloodline.
Right, hereditary nobility.
Confucius completely rejected that. He said, the Junzi is made, not born.
Okay. That is radical.
Totally. It establishes the principle of meritocracy. Anyone, prince or peasant, could achieve this highest moral and social standing through education, self-cultivation, and practicing Ren and lie. Your moral worth, your actions, determined your quality, not your birth certificate.
And that idea that merit matters more than birth, that must have been the seed for the later examination system.
Absolutely. That's the philosophical justification for it. If the best people are made through effort and learning, then you need a system to identify them.
Before we jump to the exams, though, there's one more crucial piece of this foundation, right? The family.
Oh, absolutely fundamental. You can't understand Confucianism without understanding Zhao filial piety.
Shao. The duty to parents.
Yes, but it's more than just do what your parents say. It's deep respect, loyalty, care, the understanding that this is the primary, most important human relationship.
Why the most important?
Because Confucius saw the family as the training ground for society. It's the microcosm of the state.
How does that scale up?
He identified 5 key relationships: ruler-subject, father-son, husband-wife, elder brother, younger brother, friend-friend. The father-son relationship, governed by Zhao, is where you first learn duty, respect, hierarchy, and obligation.
So if you get the family right,
you get the state right. If you're a good son, you understand obedience and care. If you're a good older brother, you understand responsibility and guidance. If you're a good younger brother, you understand deference. These skills translate directly into being a good citizen, a loyal official, a responsible member of society. A well-ordered family naturally leads to a well-ordered state. It all starts at home.
It's a very bottom-up approach to fixing society.
Entirely. Moral cultivation begins in the family and radiates outwards.
So Confucius lays out this incredibly detailed blueprint. He dies, kind of unsuccessful in his own eyes. How does it actually take hold and dominate for, 2,000 years?
Well, it wasn't immediate. For a few centuries after his death, Confucianism was just one school of thought among many. You had Taoists, legalists, others. But things shifted during the Han Dynasty, starting around 200 BCE.
Okay, the Han. What changed?
The Han Dynasty unified China again after another period of chaos. They needed a strong, centralized state, and crucially, they needed reliable, educated people to run the massive bureaucracy. They couldn't just rely on our hereditary aristocrats anymore.
They needed a system?
They needed a system and a shared ideology, and they saw the potential in Confucianism, its emphasis on order, duty, hierarchy, and education. So the Han state started promoting Confucian classics as the basis for education.
Institutionalizing it.
Exactly. They established imperial academies, and eventually, the very first versions of the civil service examinations began to take shape, testing candidates on their knowledge of these Confucian texts. The Han recognized that if you want skilled, loyal administrators who share a common ethical framework, you have to test for it.
So the Han laid the groundwork.
They built the institutional foundation, and that foundation is what the later Tang Dynasty would build upon, and perfect, leading to this incredible era we're about to discuss.
Okay, so let's fast forward. We leave the Han Dynasty, laying the groundwork, we move through some periods of division, and we arrive at what's often seen as the peak of Chinese civilization, the Tang Dynasty, roughly 7th to 10th century CE.
Right. The Tang is really the moment where that Confucian ideal of the scholar official reaches its absolute dazzling peak.
What was the Tang like?
It was an extraordinary time, generally peaceful, incredibly prosperous, militarily strong, and remarkably open to the world. The capital city, Chang'an.
Modern Shin, right.
Modern Xi'an, yes. It was the largest, most cosmopolitan city on Earth at the time, absolutely teeming with traders, monks, artists, diplomats from Persia, India, Central Asia, Japan, Korea. It was a true global hub connected by the Silk Road. A real golden age.
Sounds vibrant. And in this huge, successful empire, how did they manage it all? How did they run the show?
Through a highly developed, fully refined imperial examination system. This was the engine of the state.
Building on what the Han started.
Exactly, but taking it to a whole new level. This system was the ultimate expression of that Confucian meritocracy we talked about. Forget noble birth. Your path to power lay through these exams.
They are tough, I gather.
Brutally tough, incredibly competitive. They could last for days. Candidates were sometimes locked in small individual cells to prevent cheating. You had to show comprehensive mastery of the Confucian classics, history, law, administrative principles. You had to write complex policy essays.
Okay, makes sense. Testing knowledge needed for government. But then comes the kicker.
Then comes the kicker. The part that sounds, well, almost unbelievable to modern ears. A major, absolutely crucial, non-negotiable part of the highest level examination was poetry composition.
Hold on, poetry. To get a government job, you had to write poems.
On the spot. Usually highly regulated forms of verse demanding technical perfection.
Why? I mean, seriously, why poetry? How does writing a nice verse prove you can manage tax collection or infrastructure projects? Seems inefficient, maybe even frivolous.
It seems that way to us. But you have to get inside the Confucian mindset. Remember Ren and Lai, empathy and structured practice.
Right.
The poetry component was seen as the ultimate test of both. First, mastering the incredibly strict rules of forms like Chintishi regulated verse, with its complex tonal patterns, parallel couplets, rhyme schemes that demonstrated immense discipline, intellectual rigor, and mastery of complex systems.
Okay, I can sort of see the discipline argument, like mastering intricate rules.
Exactly. If you can handle the demands of regulated verse, you can probably handle the complexities of the legal code or administrative procedure. But second, and maybe more importantly, it tested moral character and refinement.
How does poetry test morality?
The belief was that someone who could write a truly elegant, moving poem, one that showed sensitivity to nature, subtle emotion, perhaps compassion for the common people, demonstrated a cultivated heart. An official lacking that aesthetic sensibility, that empathy, was considered unfit to govern. The poem was proof of your inner harmony, your Ren.
Wow, so they literally believed you had to be a poet to be a good governor.
In essence, yes. Poetry was the sign of a well-rounded, morally developed individual ready for responsibility.
That makes the ruling class of the Tang Dynasty utterly unique, doesn't it? These scholar officials. They were literally the poets running the country.
They absolutely were. Poetry wasn't some sideline, some private hobby for these guys. It was central to their professional and social lives.
How so? What did they use it for?
Everything. Think of it as there. Well, their official communication, their social media, their private journal, all rolled into one. They wrote poems to celebrate promotions, to lament demotions, to complain about difficult assignments in remote provinces.
Like bureaucratic emails, but in verse?
Kind of. They wrote poems for state banquets, poems mourning the death of a colleague, poems exchanged with friends, and if you were a prominent official, your poems would circulate widely. They were a public statement of your intellect, your refinement, your moral standing.
Incredible. And this environment where poetry was so vital, it must have produced some amazing literature.
Oh, astonishingly so. It's considered one of the absolute high points of world poetry, and it gave us, in particular, two figures who tower above the rest, often seen as the twin peaks of Chinese poetry, Li Bai and Du Fu.
Okay, Li Bai and Du Fu. Tell us about them. Let's start with Li Bai, also known as Li Po.
Yes, Li Bai or Li Po. He's often called the banished immortal. He embodies the more romantic, Taoist-influenced side of the Tang spirit.
Banished immortal. Sounds intriguing.
He was a legend, even in his own lifetime. Known for his incredible talent, his love of wine, his almost rebellious disregard for courtly rules and stuffiness. He did serve briefly in government, but he was maybe too wild, too unconventional for the rigid official life.
So, a free spirit. What was his poetry like?
It's characterized by this soaring imagination, bold imagery, a sense of effortlessness. He writes about drinking with the moon, having conversations with mountains, flying through the cosmos. It feels spontaneous, inspired, almost mystical.
And the famous story about his death?
Ah, yes. The legend, probably not true, but it fits his persona perfectly that he died drunk in a boat, leaning over to embrace the reflection of the moon in the water, and drowned. It captures that desire to merge with nature, to escape the mundane world.
Wow. But could he also write about more down-to-earth things?
Absolutely, and with devastating simplicity. Probably his most famous poem, known by heart by millions, maybe billions, over the centuries, is Quiet Night Thought. It's pure homesickness in just 20 words.
Can you share it?
Sure, it goes. Before my bed, the bright moonlight shines. Harry, I think it is frost upon the ground. I lift my head and gaze at the bright moon. I lower my head and think of my old home.
Oh, wow. That hits hard. Simple images, but so much feeling. Mistaking moonlight for frost. That's powerful.
It's immediate visual and captures that universal pang of being far from home. That's Li Bai cosmic flights, but also profound human moments.
Okay, so that's Li Bai, the romantic immortal. Now, who was Du Fu? You said they were complementary.
Right. Du Fu is often called the poet sage. If Li Bai represents the desire to escape the world, Du Fu represents the moral duty to bear witness to the world, especially its suffering.
The poet sage. Sounds more grounded.
Absolutely. Du Fu was deeply committed to Confucian ideals of service, duty, and social responsibility. He tried hard to be a good official, but his life took a tragic turn. It coincided with one of the most devastating events in Chinese history, the An Lushan Rebellion.
Ah, the rebellion that shattered the Tang's golden age.
Exactly. It was a catastrophic civil war. It led to immense bloodshed, famine, social collapse, a huge drop in population. And Du Fu lived through it all. He became a refugee, separated from his family, witnessing the horrors firsthand. His work becomes this incredible monument to realism and compassion. He used his masterful poetic technique not for escapism, but to document the human cost of war and chaos. He's like a journalist, a social historian, but writing in verse.
What kinds of things did he write about?
The harsh realities. He wrote about corrupt officials, the suffering of soldiers, the desperation of peasants. There's a famous poem about a recruiting officer coming to a village and hauling off the last able-bodied men, leaving only the weeping old women behind. He wrote about his own poverty, his sick children, the ruin he saw everywhere.
So, where Li Bai is drinking with the moon, Du Fu is documenting suffering on Earth.
That's a great way to put it. His focus is unflinchingly on human reality, especially in times of crisis. He holds a mirror up to the broken world.
Can you give an example of his style? You mentioned Spring View.
Yes, Spring View is one of his most famous, written while he was trapped in the capital after it had been captured and ravaged by the rebels. It begins. The state is shattered, but mountains and rivers remain. In the city, spring comes, and the grass and trees grow thick.
That contrast. The nation is broken, but nature carries on.
Exactly. But then he twists it. Moved by the times, the flowers shed tears. Hating this separation, the birds startle the heart.
Wow. The flowers are weeping, the birds are startling. Nature itself feels the trauma.
Yes. He projects the human tragedy onto the natural world. It's not just observing spring, it's feeling the world's pain through the season's beauty. That line, "the birds startle the heart," conveys this constant sense of anxiety, grief, and shock so powerfully. It's realism infused with deep, empathetic feeling.
So Li Bai and Du Fu, the immortal and the sage. Two sides of the human coin, really.
Precisely. The desire for transcendence and freedom, and the moral obligation to engage with reality and suffering. And the amazing thing is, the scholar officials of the Tang were expected to appreciate and, to some extent, embody both. They needed the discipline for administration, the empathy for governance reflected in Du Fu, and perhaps the occasional yearning for Li Bai's escape. It's an incredibly rich synthesis.
Okay, so we have this incredibly sophisticated literary and political culture in Tang China. And its influence naturally didn't stop at the borders, it spread outwards.
Absolutely. Korea and Japan, in particular, looked to China as the great model of civilization. They actively imported Chinese writing systems, Buddhist philosophy, Confucian ethics, ideas about government.
But they didn't just copy it wholesale, right?
Not at all. That's what's so fascinating. They were brilliant adapters. They took these powerful foreign influences and blended them with their own unique pre-existing cultures and sensibilities, creating something entirely new.
And you said Japan, especially during its Heian period, saw a particularly revolutionary adaptation.
Yes. The Heian period in Japan, roughly late 8th to late 12th century, is remarkable. It was a long era of relative peace, at least for the aristocracy, centered around the imperial court in Heian-kyuch, which is modern Kyoto.
Heian-kyuch. And what defined this period?
An intense, almost obsessive focus on aesthetics, elegance, refinement, and subtle emotional nuance. Life at court was incredibly ritualized.
Ritualized how?
Everything was governed by complex codes of etiquette. The exact shade of your robe, the way you folded a letter, the choice of flowers you attached to it, your skill in calligraphy, your ability to compose or recognize poetry instantly. These were paramount. It was a world deeply concerned with beauty and appearances.
Sounds very refined. And maybe a little cut off from the rest of the world.
Very much so. The court aristocracy lived in this kind of glittering, insulated world, often quite detached from the realities of the provinces. It was intensely inward-looking. Lots of intricate court politics, elaborate ceremonies, poetry contests, and very complex, highly stylized love affairs, conducted largely through exchanged poems.
A world obsessed with subtle feelings and perfect form.
Exactly. And it's within this specific atmosphere that we see the next great literary leap. And it's driven primarily by women. Highly intelligent, keenly observant court ladies.
Women? How did they end up leading a literary revolution?
Well, there's a crucial linguistic factor. Remember how in China, classical Chinese was the language of power, of administration, of serious literature written by men?
Right, the official script.
Japanese men, especially those in government or studying Chinese classics, also use classical Chinese for their formal writing. But Japanese women at court, who were often highly educated in Japanese arts and literature, but generally excluded from the formal Chinese-dominated bureaucracy,
They needed another way to write.
started using and developing a new native Japanese script called kana. Kana is phonetic. It represents the sounds of spoken Japanese directly.
Ah, so it wasn't tied to the formal structures of classical Chinese.
Precisely. This freed them up enormously. They weren't bound by the weight of Chinese literary history or the demands of officialese. They could write in a way that was closer to spoken language, and they could turn their attention to the world they knew intimately. The private, emotional, psychological world of the Heian court.
So kana unlocked a new kind of writing.
It unlocked the potential for a literature focused not on statecraft or history, but on personal experience, relationships, and inner feelings. And one court lady, Murasaki Shikibu, used this new freedom to create something absolutely groundbreaking.
And this is where we get the Tale of Genji.
This is the Tale of Genji, written around the year 1000 CE. And yes, it's widely considered the world's first true novel.
The first novel. That's huge, predating things like Don Quixote by 600 years. What's it about? Is it an epic adventure?
Not an adventure in the physical sense. It's colossal in scope, over 1,000 pages in translation, hundreds of characters spanning about 3 generations. The central figure, at least for the first major part, is Hikaru Genji, the Shining Prince.
The Shining Prince.
Yeah.
Sounds like an ideal hero.
He is, in many ways, the embodiment of the Heian ideal. Incredibly handsome, a genius at all the courtly arts, poetry, music, dance, calligraphy, incense blending, and exquisitely sensitive to beauty and emotion.
Okay, so a perfect protagonist.
But that's the genius of it. He's not perfect. He's deeply flawed. The novel meticulously chronicles his life, focusing particularly on his numerous, often illicit, love affairs.
So it's a romance, or maybe lots of romances.
It has many romances, but it's far more than just that. What makes it arguably the first novel is its profound psychological depth. Genji isn't a mythic archetype. He's a complex, contradictory human being.
How so?
He's driven by aesthetic desires, by fleeting passions, by melancholy. He can be incredibly kind and sensitive, but his actions often cause immense pain and suffering, especially to the women in his life. For instance, he essentially kidnaps a young girl, Murasaki, who the author is named after, and raises her to be his ideal wife, an act shown with all its troubling implications.
So it doesn't shy away from his flaws or the consequences?
Not at all. The revolutionary aspect of Genji is its relentless focus on the inner lives of the characters. Murasaki Shikibu is less interested in grand events and more fascinated by the subtle, often unspoken currents of feeling hidden jealousy, quiet resentment, unspoken anxieties, the weight of social pressures, the complex dynamics beneath the polished surface of court life.
She's getting inside their heads.
Constantly. When characters exchange perfectly crafted poems, as they constantly do, Murasaki will often tell you what they really felt, the hidden meanings, the private sorrows or calculations behind the elegant words. It's an astonishingly early exploration of human psychology and subtext.
It sounds much more modern than something written 1,000 years ago.
It really does. And another key element is its deep engagement with the passage of time. Unlike epics that often feel timeless, Genji is steeped in the sense of transience.
How does that show up?
Characters age. Their beauty, which is so prized in high-end culture, inevitably fades. Relationships shift, people die. Genji himself dies 2/3 of the way through the book.
He does, the main character.
Yes. And the final third of the novel focuses on the next generation, living in his shadow, dealing with their own tangled relationships, haunted by the memory of Genji's brilliance and the fading of that golden era. It's a profound meditation on loss and impermanence.
That feeling of impermanence, is there a specific concept for that in Japanese culture?
There is. It's central to high-end aesthetics and absolutely permeates the Tale of Genji. It's the concept of mono no aware.
Mono no aware?
It's famously difficult to translate directly. It means something like the pathos of things, or an awareness of impermanence, or maybe a gentle sadness at the transient nature of beauty in life.
Can you give an example?
Think of cherry blossoms. Their beauty is so intense, almost heartbreaking, precisely because you know they will scatter in a few days. That poignant feeling, the beauty inseparable from its fleetingness, that's mono no aware.
So it's not just sadness, but a kind of beautiful sadness.
Exactly. It's a sensitivity to the bittersweet reality that nothing lasts. In Genji, love affairs are filled with this feeling because they are passionate, but doomed to change or end. Beauty is cherished because it will fade. Life itself is precious because it's temporary. The whole novel is saturated in this gentle, melancholy awareness.
So the Tale of Genji isn't just telling a story, it's exploring this fundamental emotional and philosophical reality.
Absolutely. It proved that prose fiction could delve into the most subtle, complex, and poignant aspects of the human heart, exploring psychology and the nature of time in a way nothing really had before. It's an elegy for fleeting beauty, wrapped in an incredibly sophisticated narrative.
Wow, what a journey we've taken. From Confucius and chaotic ancient China, laying down this ethical blueprint for society based on personal cultivation and relationships,
Through the Tang Dynasty, where poetry literally became a qualification for running the empire, giving us the soaring Li Bai and the grounded Du Fu.
all the way to high-end Japan, where court ladies, using a new script, pioneered the psychological novel with Murasaki Shikibu's The Tale of Genji, exploring the depths of inner life and the sadness of impermanence.
It's quite a sweep, isn't it?
So, tying it all together, what does this tell us about literature in East Asia, this tradition? What's the big takeaway?
I think it shows the unique fundamental role of the written word, the power of the brush. It wasn't just art, it wasn't just entertainment, it was deeply, inextricably linked to the very fabric of life and society.
How so?
Writing was the tool for self-improvement, the primary medium for elite communication, the basis for social order, and the prerequisite for political power. The act of writing well was tied to the act of living well, living ethically, living with sensitivity, living within a structured society. It's a remarkably integrated vision of literature's purpose.
The brush and the sword. But maybe the brush shaped the world even more profoundly.
In many ways, yes. Which leads to a final thought, maybe something for you, the listener, to ponder Consider the long-term impact of a civilization that explicitly required its leaders, its administrators, to cultivate and demonstrate empathy and aesthetic sensitivity through poetry before they could govern. They had to prove they could feel subtly and deeply like Li Bai or Du Fu before getting power.
Right.
So the provocative question is, how might our own world, our own history, our own governance, maybe even the efficiency or humanity of our modern bureaucracies? How might things be different if every administrator, every politician had to be a competent poet first? What if empathy, proven through art, was a job requirement?
That's a lot to think about. A world run by poets. Fascinating.
Indeed. And on that note, our next deep dive will take us somewhere entirely different. We're heading westward into the Islamic Golden Age.
Okay, what can we expect there?
Oh, an incredible explosion of culture and intellect. We'll explore groundbreaking scientific discoveries happening alongside profound spiritual searching. We'll delve into the unique literary power and structure of Quran, lose ourselves in the ecstatic, mystical, yet deeply human poetry of Rumi, and get swept away by the sheer narrative magic and invention of 1001 Nights. It's going to be another amazing journey.
And this was another episode from our series, The Story of Literature from English Plus Podcasts. Remember that what we mentioned is just an introduction for you to step into the huge and beautiful world of world literature, so don't settle for what you have learned in this series. Start hunting for the hidden gems you can find in literatures all around the world, and don't stray far at the beginning. Start from your own culture and literature. I bet there's a lot of magnificent works of literature to be found right in your own backyard. Thanks for listening. Stay curious and never stop learning with English Plus Podcast.